Three slavers surrounded the Apache beauty. Then the rancher's bullet reached them first. The sun rose slowly over the wide, open land, painting the sky with soft colors of gold and pale blue. The air was calm and the morning felt peaceful, the kind of peace that made people believe nothing bad could happen. This land had seen many years pass, good years and hard ones, but it always kept its secrets. Far from busy towns and loud roads, this place belonged to nature, tradition, and quiet strength. She walked along a narrow dirt path, her steps steady and confident. She was an Apache woman, known in nearby areas for her calm nature and strong spirit. Her beauty was not the kind that shouted for attention. It was natural, quiet, and dignified. It showed in the way she carried herself, in the way her eyes observed everything around her. She respected the land because it was part of her life, part of her people's history. Every hill, every stretch of dry grass meant something to her. She had made this walk many times before. The path led between small hills and open ground, a route she trusted. She was not careless, but she believed in reading signs, wind direction, footprints, the silence of birds. That morning everything seemed normal. The breeze moved gently and the sky was clear. Still, deep inside, she felt a small unease she could not explain. She ignored it at first, thinking it was only tiredness or the weight of too many thoughts. Not far away, across another stretch of land, a rancher began his day early, as he always did. He was a man shaped by years of hard work. The land had taught him patience and discipline. He was not loud or flashy. People knew him as someone fair, someone who minded his own business but never turned his back on what was right. His ranch was modest, built with effort and care. He believed in simple rules: respect people, respect the land, and stand up when something feels wrong. As he checked his fences and animals, he noticed something unusual. Fresh marks on the ground where none should have been, tracks that did not belong to cattle or wildlife. He stopped and studied them carefully. Experience had taught him that small details mattered. These marks were new, careless, and heading toward a path often used by local families. His jaw tightened slightly. He did not panic, but his instincts were awake now. Back on the path, the Apache woman paused for a moment. The land felt different. The birds had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to slow. She turned her head slowly, scanning the area. There was nothing obvious, but years of living close to nature had trained her to notice when something was off. She adjusted the strap on her bag and continued walking, her posture still calm, her steps measured. Her thoughts drifted to her family and her people. Life had not been easy, but they had survived through strength and unity. She carried that history with her, like a shield. She believed that dignity was something no one could take unless she allowed it. That belief gave her confidence even when she walked alone. Meanwhile, the rancher followed the tracks for a short distance, careful not to make noise. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows. His mind worked through possibilities. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone passing through, but deep down he knew better. This land had a way of warning those who listened. He felt that warning clearly. He returned briefly to his ranch house, moving with purpose. He did not act out of anger or fear, only responsibility. He had seen too many times what happened when good people looked away. Today he would not be one of them. The Apache woman reached a more open area where the land stretched wide. Normally, this part of the walk made her feel free. Today, the open space felt exposed. She slowed slightly, her senses sharp. She noticed movement in the distance, just shadows at first. Her heart beat faster, but her face remained composed. Panic had never helped anyone. She reminded herself to stay alert and calm. The rancher mounted his horse and headed toward the open land, following the direction of the tracks. The horse sensed his rider's focus and moved smoothly. The rancher's eyes scanned the horizon, every muscle alert. He hoped he was wrong, hoped this was all just a misunderstanding. But hope did not stop him from preparing for what he might face. As the distance closed, Both lives moved toward the same point on the land, unaware of how closely their fates were about to connect. The Apache woman adjusted her pace, considering whether to turn back or move forward. She trusted her judgment, but the land offered few places to hide. Still, she refused to show fear, even to herself. The morning sun continued to rise, indifferent to human danger. Grass moved softly under the wind. Somewhere far away, a bird cried out. The world looked peaceful, but beneath that calm surface, tension grew. The rancher slowed his horse near a small rise, dismounting quietly. From there, he could see more clearly. Shapes moved ahead, not part of the land, not part of nature. His concern turned into certainty. Someone was out there who should not be. The Apache woman stopped walking altogether now. She stood tall, her shoulders straight. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. She had learned long ago that fear was something others fed on. She would not give it to them. The land seemed to hold its breath as both the rancher and the woman stood at different points, seconds away from a moment that would change everything. The quiet morning, once so peaceful, now felt heavy with expectation, and though neither of them knew it yet, this was the last calm moment before the silence would break. The Apache woman stood still, listening. The land no longer felt friendly. The silence pressed against her ears, thick and warning. She had learned long ago that when nature goes quiet, it is not a good sign. Slowly, without turning her head too fast, she looked to her left and then to her right. That was when she saw them clearly. 3 men stepped out from behind a low rise of land. They were strangers, their clothes dusty, their movements careless. They did not belong here. They walked with the confidence of people who believed they had power simply because they traveled in a group. Their eyes rested on her in a way that made her stomach tighten, but she did not step back. She had faced hard moments before. Life had taught her strength, not fear. Still, she knew danger when she saw it. These men were not lost travelers. Their posture, their slow smiles, the way they spread out without thinking, all of it told her they had planned this moment. One of them spoke first, his voice loud in the quiet land. He said something meant to sound friendly, but the tone carried disrespect. The others laughed softly. The sound felt wrong, like something breaking the peace of the morning. She did not answer right away. Silence, she knew, could be powerful. She lifted her chin slightly and met their eyes one by one. Her calm unsettled them. They had expected fear. Instead, they found strength. The men stepped closer, not too fast, not too slow. They circled without fully closing in, testing her reactions. One of them commented on how alone she was. Another spoke as if the land belonged to them. Each word was meant to push her to see where she would break. She did not break. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. She told them this was not their place. She said they should leave. There was no shouting, no pleading, just truth spoken clearly. That seemed to irritate them more than fear would have. One man's face hardened. Another smirked and shook his head. They had not expected resistance. They were used to people backing away, lowering their eyes, giving in. Her strength challenged their false sense of control. The space around her felt smaller now. She measured her options quickly. Running would be risky in the open land. Standing her ground was dangerous too. Still, she refused to let panic take over. Panic clouded the mind. Calm sharpened it. Not far away, the rancher watched from a distance. He had moved quietly, using the land for cover. From his position, he could see the figures clearly now. His chest tightened when he realized the woman was surrounded. He recognized her. He had seen her before near the edge of town, always respectful, always carrying herself with dignity. His hands curled slowly into fists. This was exactly what he feared. He stayed still, observing. Rushing in without thinking could make things worse. He needed to understand the situation fully. He counted the men, 3. He watched how they moved, how they spoke. He could tell by their behavior that they meant harm. His jaw clenched, but his mind stayed focused. Back on the open land, the men's words grew sharper. One stepped closer than the others, invading her space. She did not step back. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her breathing slow. She reminded herself of her people, of the strength passed down through generations. She was not alone, even if no one stood beside her. She looked past them briefly, scanning the land. No help in sight. Still, something inside her told her not to give up hope. The land had a way of balancing things. She believed that deeply. The men mistook her calm for weakness. One of them laughed again, louder this time. He said something meant to provoke her, to make her react. She answered him with silence. Her eyes held no fear, only resolve. That unsettled them further. The rancher shifted slightly, choosing a better angle. He knew this land well. He knew where to step, where to pause. Every movement was careful. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He had faced hard decisions before, moments where doing nothing was not an option. This was one of those moments. He watched as the men moved closer to her, tightening the circle. His thoughts raced. Timing mattered. One wrong move could put her in greater danger. He waited for the right second, watching their focus, their spacing, their attention. The Apache woman felt the pressure building. She knew she could not reason with them. Still, she stood tall. She spoke again, telling them firmly to step away. Her words carried strength, not anger. That only seemed to push them further. One of the men glanced around, checking the land as if to make sure no one was watching. That small action did not go unnoticed by the rancher. He saw it clearly. It told him everything he needed to know. The rancher took a slow breath. He reminded himself why he believed in standing up for what was right. This land was not a place where cruelty ruled, not while he had breath in his body. The Apache woman shifted her weight slightly, preparing herself mentally for whatever might come next. She did not pray out loud, but inside she reached for strength. She promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not lose who she was. The sun climbed higher, casting strong light across the scene. There was nowhere to hide now. Everything felt exposed. The men seemed to like that. They believed daylight protected them. They were wrong. The rancher adjusted his position one last time. He could see clearly now. The woman's posture, the men's movements. The danger was no longer a possibility. It was real, and it was happening now. He knew this was the point of no return. Waiting any longer would be a mistake. On the open land, the air felt heavy, as if the world itself was waiting. The Apache woman met the eyes of the man closest to her. She did not blink. Her silence spoke louder than words. And just as the men began to move again, confident they had control, the balance of the moment quietly shifted. They did not feel it yet, but it had already begun. Time seemed to slow down in that open stretch of land. Every sound felt louder, every movement heavier. The Apache woman stood in the center of the open ground, the three men spaced around her like shadows that refused to leave. She could feel their presence without even turning her head. The air around her felt tight, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She focused on staying calm. Fear, she knew, could show in small ways, a shaking hand, uneven breathing, restless eyes. She would not allow that. She planted her feet firmly into the earth beneath her. This land had known her people long before these men ever stepped on it. That thought gave her strength. One of the men stepped closer again, his boots pressing into the dry soil. He spoke slowly, as if enjoying the tension. His words were meant to make her feel small, to remind her that she stood alone. She listened without responding. Inside, her thoughts were sharp and clear. She was watching them carefully now, noting their positions, their habits, the way they glanced at one another for approval. She noticed something important. They were confident but not careful. They believed control was already theirs. That belief made them careless. Her eyes moved briefly across the land again. Still no one in sight, still no clear path away. The open ground offered no cover, no easy escape. Yet she did not regret walking this path. Regret wasted energy. She needed every bit of focus she had. The men continued talking, their voices overlapping. One tried to step even closer, reaching the space where she could feel his breath. That was when she finally spoke again. Her voice was firm, clear, and steady. She told him to step back. There was no request in her tone, only command. For a moment, the man hesitated. He was not used to being spoken to that way. The others laughed, trying to break the tension, but something had shifted. Her strength was no longer something they could ignore. Not far away, hidden behind a rise in the land, the rancher remained still. His body was tense, but his mind was focused. He had a clear view now. He could see the way the men surrounded her, how close they stood. He could see her posture, upright, unbroken. That sight stirred something deep inside him. He had grown up believing that character was revealed in moments like this. Moments when it was easier to turn away than to act. His father had taught him that land did not just belong to those who owned it, but to those who protected what was right on it. He adjusted his position slightly, careful not to make a sound. Every step was measured. His eyes never left the scene ahead. He watched their body language, waiting for a sign, a mistake, an opening. His heart beat hard against his chest, but his hands remained steady. Back in the open, the Apache woman felt the tension tightening like a rope. The men were growing impatient. One of them looked around again, scanning the land quickly. That movement did not escape her notice. Neither did it escape the ranchers. The man who had stepped closest spoke again, louder this time. He was trying to assert control, to push past her resistance with words. She met his gaze directly. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. That look unsettled him more than anger would have. She thought of her family, her ancestors, the stories passed down through generations. They had faced hardship with dignity. She would do the same. Whatever happened next, she would not surrender her spirit. The men shifted positions, closing the circle just a little more. The space around her shrank. She adjusted her stance, readying herself mentally. She did not know how this moment would end, but she knew who she was. The rancher felt the urgency rise. He could sense the moment slipping toward something irreversible. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. He reminded himself that haste could be dangerous, but hesitation could be worse. He needed the right moment. He studied the men again. One was distracted, another standing too close to the others. Their focus was entirely on the woman now. They had forgotten the land around them. They had forgotten that they were not alone in this world. The sun climbed higher, its light harsh and revealing. Sweat formed on the rancher's brow, but he did not move to wipe it away. His eyes burned with focus. He knew that once he acted, there would be no turning back. But some lines, once crossed, demanded response. In the open ground, the Apache woman felt time stretch thin. Each second felt heavy. She controlled her breathing, slow and even. She refused to let them see the tension inside her. Her calm had become her shield. One of the men reached out slightly, testing boundaries. She did not flinch, but her body tightened. Her voice came again, strong and unwavering. She told him once more to stop. The command carried authority, not desperation. That was the moment the rancher knew waiting was no longer an option. Everything inside him aligned, his values, his instincts, his sense of responsibility. He adjusted his stance, grounding himself. His movements were smooth, practiced, controlled. He took one last careful look at the scene ahead. The land felt silent again, unnaturally so. Even the wind seemed to pause. The Apache woman stood her ground, eyes forward, spine straight. The men, confident only moments before, felt something they could not explain, a sudden shift, a sense that control was slipping through their fingers. They did not know why. They did not yet see what was coming. But in that stretched, breathless moment, as the balance of power began to tilt, the land itself seemed to choose a side. The moment broke without warning. A sharp sound cut through the still air, clear and commanding. It echoed across the open land, rolling off the low hills and breaking the tense silence that had held everyone frozen. The sound was not wild or rushed. It was controlled, deliberate, and final. The men reacted first. Surprise flashed across their faces. Confidence vanished in an instant. They turned toward the sound, confusion replacing the cruel certainty they had carried moments before. None of them had expected anyone else to be there. None of them had thought beyond their own false sense of power. The Apache woman did not move at first. She felt the shift immediately, even before she fully understood what had happened. The pressure around her loosened. The circle that had felt so tight only seconds earlier suddenly broke apart. She drew in a sharp breath, her heart racing, but her posture remained strong. From behind the rise in the land, the rancher stepped forward into view. He did not rush. He did not shout. His presence alone changed everything. He stood firm, grounded, eyes steady and focused. His expression was calm, but there was no softness in it. It was the look of someone who had made a decision and would not step back from it. The men hesitated. One of them stumbled backward. Another raised his hand slightly without thinking. The third glanced around, realizing too late how exposed they were. The power they believed they had moments earlier dissolved like dust in the wind. The rancher spoke, his voice clear and controlled. He told them to step away. There was no anger in his tone, no desire to prove anything. His words carried authority because they came from certainty, not emotion. The Apache woman finally turned her head slightly, enough to see him clearly. For the first time since the danger began, she felt something other than tension. Relief washed through her, slow and overwhelming. She did not show it openly, but her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. The men argued among themselves in low voices, panic slipping through their words. One tried to speak back, to regain control with empty threats. The rancher did not respond to the noise. He simply stood his ground, unmoved. The land seemed to support him. The open space that had once felt dangerous now felt honest. There was nowhere for false confidence to hide. Slowly, one by one, the men backed away. Their steps were uneven, their movements rushed. They no longer looked at the woman with control or cruelty. They avoided her eyes completely. Whatever they thought they were before, that illusion was gone. When they finally turned and left, their figures shrinking against the wide land, the silence returned. But this time it was different. It was no longer heavy with fear. It felt like release. The rancher waited until they were well out of sight before lowering his stance. Only then did he turn his full attention to the woman. He kept his distance, careful not to overwhelm her after what she had endured. He asked if she was all right. His voice was steady, respectful. He did not assume. He did not speak down to her. He simply asked. She nodded once. Then, after a moment, she nodded again, more firmly. Her breath was still uneven, but her eyes were clear. She had faced danger and come through it without losing herself. They stood there for a moment, two strangers bound by a single moment neither would ever forget. She thanked him, her words quiet but sincere. Gratitude was clear in her voice, but so was pride. She did not speak as someone who had been saved, but as someone who had been supported when it mattered most. The rancher shook his head slightly. He said anyone decent would have done the same, but even as he said it, he knew that was not true. Many people looked away. Many chose comfort over responsibility. He had simply chosen not to. The Apache woman studied him for a moment, reading more than his words. She could tell he was not a man who acted for praise. His actions spoke louder than anything he could say. The sun stood high now, its light strong and warm. The land looked the same as it had earlier, but nothing felt the same. Something important had shifted, not just in the moment, but inside both of them. The rancher offered to walk with her for a while, just until she felt safe again. He made the offer gently, leaving the choice with her. She considered it, then agreed. Strength did not mean refusing help. It meant knowing when to accept it. They walked side by side, not close, not distant. The silence between them was comfortable, respectful. No questions were rushed. No explanations demanded. Some moments did not need many words. As they moved, the woman felt the tension slowly leave her body. Her steps became easier. Her thoughts steadied. She knew this memory would stay with her, but it would not define her. She would not let fear claim that power. The rancher kept watch as they walked, his awareness still sharp. He knew the danger had passed, but he also knew the land well enough to remain cautious. Responsibility did not end the moment a threat disappeared. When they reached a point where paths separated, they stopped. She turned to him, meeting his eyes fully now. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something deeper, respect. She told him she would remember what he did. He nodded once, accepting her words without ceremony. They parted ways then, each returning to their own world, but neither walked away unchanged. Behind them, the land remained quiet and wide, holding the memory of the moment when cruelty failed and courage answered without hesitation. And though the sound that broke the silence had been brief, its echo would remain, carried not by noise but by choice. The days that followed moved quietly, but nothing felt the same as before. The Apache woman returned to her community with steady steps. She did not rush, and she did not linger. The land felt familiar again, yet she sensed a change within herself. What had happened stayed with her, not as fear, but as a reminder of strength, her own, and the kind she had witnessed in another. When her people noticed the shift in her eyes, they did not press her with questions. They understood silence. In their way, silence carried respect. Later, when she chose to speak, she told the story calmly, without drama or anger. She spoke of the land, the danger, and the moment when choice stood against cruelty. Her words traveled carefully among her people. They were not used to stories that praised outsiders easily. But this one was different. It was not about rescue. It was about a line that should not be crossed, and someone who refused to let it be crossed. The elders listened closely. They nodded, not with surprise but with understanding. They had lived long enough to know that goodness sometimes appeared in unexpected places. They reminded the younger ones that dignity must always be protected, and courage sometimes arrived quietly, without asking for recognition. The woman continued her life as before. She worked, she laughed, she walked the land she loved. But now, when she looked across the open fields, she carried certainty instead of unease. She knew that danger could exist, but she also knew she could face it without losing herself. Far from her community, the rancher returned to his routine. The fences still needed checking. The animals still needed care. The land demanded the same hard work as always. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside, something had settled into place. He did not speak of what happened right away. He was not a man who sought attention. Still, word traveled as it always did. Someone had seen the men leaving in a hurry. Someone else had noticed the rancher riding back later than usual. Quiet questions spread through the area. When asked directly, he answered simply. He said he had done what anyone should do. Some nodded. Others looked away. A few understood that his words carried more weight than they seemed. At night, when the land was quiet and the stars stretched wide above him, he replayed the moment in his mind. Not with pride, but with clarity. He knew he would make the same choice again. That knowledge brought him peace. He thought often of the woman, not with ownership, not with expectation, but with respect. He admired her strength, her calm, her refusal to bend. He hoped she was well. That was enough. Time moved forward as it always did. The men who had threatened the peace of the land did not return. Their absence was noticed but not celebrated loudly. Justice did not always need an audience. Sometimes it only needed resolve. The land itself seemed to breathe easier. Paths once crossed with tension felt open again. People walked with a little more confidence. They spoke a little more freely. Courage, once shown, had a way of spreading quietly. Weeks later, the Apache woman and the rancher crossed paths again, by chance rather than plan. It was near the edge of town, where trade and travel often mixed different worlds. They recognized each other instantly. They exchanged a simple greeting. No long speeches followed. No explanations were needed. The understanding between them was already complete. They spoke briefly about the weather, the land, the passing of time. Ordinary words, but spoken with uncommon respect. Before parting, she thanked him again, not for what he had done, but for who he had chosen to be. He replied just as simply. He said the land had taught him well. They went their separate ways, carrying the moment lightly, without burden. Life continued to test both of them, as life always does. There were hard days. There were moments of doubt, but neither forgot that one clear moment when choice mattered more than comfort. For the Apache woman, the memory became a quiet source of strength. It reminded her that standing firm could change outcomes. It reminded her that dignity was powerful, even in the face of danger. For the rancher, the moment reaffirmed a belief he had carried all his life, that doing what is right does not require permission, applause, or reward. It only requires action. Years later, the story would still be told, not loudly, not often, but truthfully. It would be shared as a reminder that real courage does not announce itself. It steps forward when silence would be easier. The land would remember too. It remembered the morning that began in calm, passed through danger, and ended in balance. It remembered the choice that restored peace without seeking control. It remembered the strength of a woman who did not bow, and the resolve of a man who did not turn away. And so the story ends not with celebration, but with quiet certainty. That sometimes, in the wide and waiting world, one moment of courage is enough to change everything.